Hello and welcome back to screenblue.com.
This section we're going to start learning about JUnit testing framework. So what is JUnit then? JUnit is a testing framework for Java to help us to perform unit tests for our Java code that we have written. So basically JUnit is kind of like a testing framework, right? To write unit tests for programmers. Now your next question is, what is unit test, right? And what's the use of it? Well, what happens in real time in software industry is that whenever the programmers write the code, and before they submit the code, right, and say, okay, the QA or the testers is ready to test my program, right, they have to test themselves, right? And to do that, they write unit tests. If they do not do that and they just assign the testers to test the program, it might take a lot of time for tester to test it because there's going to be a lot of bugs, right? It could be a syntax bugs, it could be a logic bugs, it could be functional requirement bugs, and so on, right? In that case, it's very essential to actually write unit tests, okay? So for unit tests, JUnit is the testing framework. So for unit tests, JUnit is the default testing framework in Java, okay? So JUnit uses annotation to identify methods that's a test. So what basically means that is that we already learned about how you can create methods, right? So how Java or JUnit basically identifies the method from other methods is that the JUnit test method has the annotation called @test, right? @test annotation here. JUnit test method are annotated by @test annotation. Okay, so JUnit 4.3 uses the following annotation. So here I'm saying 4.3 because that's the latest one that right now. So this JUnit version keeps increasing, right? So they keep updating the JUnit framework. So right now it's the latest one, 4.3, right? So you might have more annotations, but this is the annotation here. So if you want to import all JUnit cases, you're going to do import arg.junit-star, which means it's going to import all JUnit classes. @test, it identifies a method as a test method, just like we said before. @before, right? So that means method executed before each test. So if you have before test, that means that that method will be executed before each test, okay? And same thing here, after test means executed after each test. Okay, so let's say you have a test, right? JUnit test. And you want to run something before each test, right? So you can do before test, and for after test, you can do after. Now you have before class, right? So that's static method here. So it's executed once before start of all tests. Okay, so let's say you have like 10 tests in your JUnit class file, right? And before each test, or before all the tests, you want to run the test once before, right? So before you run all tests, you want to run the methods prior to that, right? So in that case, you would use before class. And same thing with after class. After all the tests is completed, you want to run after class as well. Ignore means, let's say you have a test, but you don't want to run it. Then you can have annotation called @ignore, and that's gonna like not run the test. And let's say you're actually doing, you're doing negative tests, right? So basically you're expecting exception, right? So we learned about exception. What exception is? Exception handling class. So basically it's gonna fail if the method does not throw the named exception. So if you have create a test and says that test expected equal exception, whatever exception you want, right? The class, and if your test did not throw an exception, then it's going to fail. It's kind of like a negative testing, right? The other one here is test timeout equal 100, right? So let's say you want to run a test and you want to execute in certain time, right? And if it doesn't do that, you want to fail the test, right? In that case, you could use this @test, and here you provide timeout equal some milliseconds that you want to. You want the test to run, right? So in this millisecond, you want the test to complete. It fails if the method takes longer than 100 milliseconds. So here, if I had timeout equal 100, it's going to fail. The test does not pass within 100 milliseconds. For instance, I've got this class here, addition of class, okay? And I have this method here, add, right? And I do not have public, right? This is a default method that we learned in our previous lecture, right? It has just int, okay? It returns an integer. And here I've got two variables, a and b. It returns the sum of a and b, right? Simple as that. Now I created a unit test for this method, right? So that's what's basically what happens in real time as well. Every time the developers create a method, they have to write a unit test first. So here I created a unit test in here, right? It's called JUnit test. And here I've created a method called public void test add, right? I don't want to return anything, I just want to run it. And here I've got this annotation here called @test. That's how actually your program identifies, okay, this is the test method. This is the test method I need to run if somebody wants me to run my test. So here I created an instance of this addition equal app1 equal new addition. And here I've got assert equals. So we're going to talk about that in our next lecture here. So here assert equals. So here I'm actually adding two numbers, 30 and 10, I'm actually comparing the sum to this number here, 40, right? And that's true. And here, same thing with here, assert equals. And here, I'm actually comparing two numbers. And here as well, assert true and false, assert not equals. Okay, so now here, if I do that, it's going to run all tests and it will be all green. So if you see it green, that means that all your tests passed. Okay, I'm just giving an example of what JUnit test looks like. So now, JUnit provides static method to test for certain conditions with the assert method, right? Assert class. Search statements typically start with assert, right? So we already learned about that. Search statement compares the actual value returned by a test to expected value and throws asserts an exception if the comparison value fails. Search uses the following methods. Fail. So if you have fail, then it means it fails the method. Assert true, right? So we learned about assert true in our previous example here. So I have a message and boolean, right? It checks that the boolean condition is true. Okay, then it's gonna throw this message here if it says true or false. Okay, assert false. So here you're gonna check that boolean condition is false. Assert equals. So here actually you're gonna compare the expected and the actual. Here actually this message is optional here. Same thing with here, assert true and false. So if you want to throw a message, right, if it fails or passes, then you can insert here as well. So here I'm saying assert equals message. It's optional. So expected and actual. So test that two values are equal. So assert equals, you're actually comparing two values. Assert false, you're actually making sure it returns false. Assert true, you're making sure it returns true. And assert null, you're actually comparing if the object is null. Assert not null, you're actually comparing the object is not null. So for instance, I'm going to give the same example here. So now we learned about what assert equals is, right? So assert equals, so basically you're comparing this value, which is 40, right? And your actual value is you want to add this app. You're going to call this add method here, and you're adding two numbers, 30 and 10. So you're going to get 40. And here, 55, assert equals 55, you're going to add 22 and 33, which returns 55. Returns 55, as you can see here. If you add 22 and 33, it returns 55, and that's also true. And assert equals 78, so 37 plus 41 equals 78. It's also returns true. Assert true, app1.compare. So I have another compare method here. Basically, it compares two numbers. I don't see it here, but I can. So I have another method here, assert true, which basically compares two numbers. If it returns true, it says true. If it returns false, it says false. Okay. Here I've got assert not equals. So I'm comparing this number here, 20, and you add these two numbers, 10 plus 15, 25. They're not equal, and your test passes here. That's why you don't see anything in here. So we used assert equals, assert true, and assert false, assert not equals, assert null, assert not null. Those are the methods of assert class, okay? And you're going to use it all the time in your real-time projects. The other one here is JUnit test before after test. Let's say you want to run something before each test, then you can use this before annotation and have a method here. So I've got this method called before test, and I want to run this method before each test. I can do that using add before in here, right? Remember here, I've got add test. So basically it tests your methods, right? Or your code. And I've got this before, add before. So I want to run this method before each test, right? I only got one test, but you want to run, if you have 10 tests as well, this is going to run, okay? So basically this add before means this method is going to run before each test, okay? It says running before test. And same thing with add after. So you want to run this after each test, right? You want to run the method after each test, and you're gonna you have this add after in here, okay? And this is gonna run after each test. It's gonna say running after test. If I run this, it's gonna say running before test. Then it's gonna say test complete and running after test. So if you have 10 methods for each test, you're gonna do running before test, run stat, and again, second one running before test, and so on. So basically, if you want to run your method for each test, you could use add before. And you want to run method after each test, you can use add after. And the next one is before and after class, right? And let's say you have 20 tests, right? And you want to run method before the running all the tests. So you want to run methods before all the tests. So you have 10 tests. So you want to run a method before all the 10 tests, then you can use before class, right? So you're basically running before class. So here, and you have an annotation called add before class. And you can see here, this is like the class method, so you have to provide static in here, right? We learned about what static method is. So you're going to provide public static void before class, and this is going to run before class. And I have another one called after class, and it's also a static method because you're going to run this method after all the tests is complete, right? So you're going to run at the end of your test, right? So that's why it says running after class. It's going to say running after class. So if I run this, I'm going to get running before class, right? Since I have two tests in here. It's going to run this one here. Then it's going to run this one here, addition test complete. And I've got a subtract class in here. I create an instance. Basically subtracts two numbers in here. And once that's done, it's going to say subtraction test complete. At the end, it's going to say running after class. So as you can see here, before and after class ran only once, right? You can see here, right? Before and after class ran only once. So in that case, if you want to run the methods for all the tests, you can do before class. And if you want to run a method after all the tests, you can do after class. Okay, and the common uses is going to be, let's say you want to run a file, right? Let's say you want to create a file, then you can use before class method where you actually create a file, right? And you do all your tests, and at the end, let's say you want to delete that file, then you can do after class and delete the file, right? That's one common uses of using before class and after class. And now the last one here is test suite, okay? Let's say you want to run all your tests, right? So I've got JUnit test, test before test, and test before after class. So right now we've been running one by one, right? So now let's say you have 100 tests, right? If you run one by one, it's going to take you almost half an hour, right? And that's kind of also manual work because you have to go in each class and do run and again run and run, so on, right? So you're basically running each test manually, right? And that's very hectic, right? That's going to take a lot of time, right? And very repetitive as well, right? In that case, you want to run all your tests. So JUnit has this thing called suite. Okay, so test suite is basically a combination of all your tests, right? So test suite contains all your tests that you have, okay? So you can do that using this JUnit test suite as well. And the syntax here is a little confusing. So here I've got this at run with, okay? So basically you're gonna run with this suite.class, so that's an annotation here as well. And here you're gonna do at suite.suite classes. Okay, this is, you're gonna type it the same, exactly what it is in here. And in this, what do you call it, parentheses, you have this curly braces. And here you're gonna provide all your tests. So I have JUnit test.class. So I create a JUnit test, right? So I'm gonna do JUnit and .class, comma, and JUnit test before after test, so that's one the other one I created, dot class, comma, JUnit before and after class test, dot class, right? I only have 3 now, so I've got only 3 in here, but you can have like n number of tests in here. And I've got this empty class in here, public class JUnit test suite, has nothing in here. It's just the syntax of how you can actually run your suite. Okay, so now if I run this one here, basically it's gonna run this JUnit test first because I have it here. So it runs running JUnit test, then it's gonna run before after test. So it says running before test and test complete running after test because that was inside this JUnit test. Then it's going to run JUnit test before after class, which is running before class, addition test complete, subtraction test complete, running after class. So here I was able to run all 3 test classes with the suite, right? Test suite you'll have in the real time as well. You're going to have this class, similar kind of class like this, where you have all your tests, right? And now with this one, you can just right click and run. And you're going to run all 100 or 200 or 1,000 tests. It's going to run one by one. Okay. The other way you can do is from command terminal, which we're going to learn in our future classes. So that is pretty much in this lecture. You learn about what JUnit test is, and we also learned about different annotation of JUnit. For instance, add test, add before, add after, add before class, add after class. And we also learned about how you can actually run, combine all your tests and run using suite.